Hi, welcome back. So we are at the second outline to discuss dictionary. In this outline, we are going to be covering some points. First, we'll be looking at the main introduction to dictionary instantiation and different way to instantiate a dictionary in Python from object-oriented perspective, of course. And then we'll be looking at the use case of dictionaries when they can be really handy. And we will be looking at a specific kind of method of use called the default dict. Which is a very, very powerful method that can get you a lot of capsulated features while you are using it. Finally, we'll be looking at the counter built-in function. So before we start, I would like to say that dictionaries are really incredible and useful container that allow us to map object directly to other object. They are extremely efficient at looking up values given a specific key object that maps to that value, because the main structure of dictionary based on this mapping between key and value. Let me take you back to Visual Studio Code and show you the exact instantiation of dictionary. The main idea of dictionary, of course, we have two options. Either we use the word dict to create that kind of a dictionary, or we can use the two open curly bracket to create that dictionary. And the main idea, as I said before, you have this key and then you have this corresponding value to that key. This is the main basic idea of dictionary. Now let me take you an example. Let's create here a stocks, starting with the dictionary first to define a key. Let's assume that, as we had done before, take the key to be a symbol of a certain stock. Let's take this G, for example. And then it could be that a tuple of the prices that we were discussing before. So you take certain prices here. Now I have just created this key for this particular sample and corresponding its value. Based on that, with a comma followed by that, I can create as many keys as I want. So this is another, for example, a key sample of MSFT, whatever. This is the basic and the most simplest way to instantiate or create actually a data structure of type dictionary in Python. Let's print the stocks itself and see what that would look like. You could see in the printing, he is going to print every key that exists in that dictionary and corresponding value. You could also search for an actual key within that particular dictionary. I could run again, and as I expected, I could get the values corresponding to that key. However, if I want to, let's say I'm searching for a key that does not exist within that, of course, I'm going to be encountered with that raising error of key errors. Of course, we can handle that, but just want to show you the main idea. Now, if I want to look at the built-in function within this dict, as you can see, the number of dict class, which is actually instantiating, creating everything related to this data structure in particular. Now, some of those methods are really, really useful. Let me actually take you to one of them, get, which is actually, you can see the duck string. It returned the value for key if key is in the dictionary. Else it will return a default value. So basically, if you are using get, you provide the function with the key you're looking for and what is the default if this key is not exist. So it's like kind of a handling of the error like what we did in here. So let's try to actually implement that. Instead of reaching out to the stocks directly that way, what I could say, again, stocks dot, here I'm going to use the get function. And in the get function, I'm going to provide the key that I'm looking for. Let's say this is XXX. And here I will say what is the default in case the key is not there. I could, for example, print a sentence, say not found. You can see now, instead of throwing an error, we got to have this default value. It's a very, very nice method. I think so. Another method I want to introduce you to call the set default. You can see actually if I go to stocks here, I can see it's in here. Now this set default is really powerful. It does the job of the get that we saw, but there's one more different. If I am searching for a key that is not exist, it's not only will return the default value, but will create that key for me and add it to the dictionary. So for example, searching for this BBRY, and we know it's not exist. So in this line, I'm saying go and get for me this particular key from the dictionary. And if you don't find it, then the default return for me is going to be this tuple. This key now, it is exists. So if I won't have to go to the standard normal way and I'm looking for BVRY, exactly as expected. So we have these different methods now. We went through of creating a standard way of creating dictionary using get, using set default. I'm going to introduce you to a method that is really, really useful. So in this case, if I want to use the for loop, and here I'm going to create two particular keywords, one called the stock, one called the value. I'm going to go to stocks, which is the dictionary, but I'm going to go to items. What I'm going to do, I'm going to print for you just to show you the stock for now. Let's try to run this. You can see these are the stocks, which are the keys. This first keyword here, it represents the key of the dictionary. The second will represent the value. I'll run this one more time. I should get these two tuples. So what I'm trying to say, these items, it gives you an ability to unpack the key alone and the values alone to specific keys and values in dictionaries. Now notice that stocks don't show up in the same order. This is very important. I mean, sometimes if I am adding number of these stocks, they might not be in that order. Why? Once we create dictionary in Python, the way they are stored actually is hashable. It will not just be added to the bottom of the dictionary. It will follow a specific kind of a structure to store the key. And that's why dictionaries are very fast in looking up a specific key. This is something you have to actually keep in mind. Now, let me show you what type of key that we can actually assign. We are always stuck with this word of string. We can have different type of keys. Actually, let's just create this empty dictionary. Okay, this is a complete empty dictionary, and we'll show you different kind of key that I can create for this dictionary. First key, let's call to random key. I'm going to just use a normal string. Let's add one more key, and this time the key is going to be an integer. How about if we want to assign, for example, tuple? What other options I can have? Believe me, I can have it as an object. What I'm trying to say, let's create here a class. Now watch carefully if I instantiate here an object, and watch carefully what I can add actually. I'm going to add the X object to be the key. How about if I want to use a normal standard list? Here, I might just not to break everything down. Just let me run up to actually this particular line here, exactly as expected. So here the string, this is a normal string. The second key, this is an integer. Second key is a tuple, and this is an object key. So the key can be anything of your choice. In fact, it's not has to be always a string. But one thing keep in mind, we cannot create a key as a list in Python. It means to say this is a list key. This will throw me an error because of the data structure of dictionary. As I mentioned before, it has a specific data structure, use a hashable way. So basically, every key I create, it will be mapped to that value, kind of immutable. You can't change it on the fly, otherwise it's going to be problematic. So string here, once it's created, I can't change the string on the fly. It's been created. That's why I can map here. Same for integer or tuple and the object that you instantiated. So it will always map. But list in Python, it is something that I can, because it can be changed on the fly or while you are running the application. That's why it's forbidden to do that. Same for dictionary, by the way. I can't create a key as a dictionary itself. So these are the most important kind of ideas you need to be familiar with. So let's look at some of the use of dictionaries. In fact, there are two major ways I can think of dictionary are very useful. The first is dictionary where all the key represent different instance of a similar object. For example, we have seen that in the stock examples that every key represents a stock symbol and then attached or mapped to a certain value related to that stock symbol. The second design of dictionary where each key might represent some aspect of a single structure. In this case, we would separate that each key has a complete different object structure. I think the best example I can share with you in this case, it's JSON data structure. So if you look at JSON, it takes every key it's attached or mapped to a complete segregated object. So the whole JSON idea based on a dictionary in this second case scenario. So these are the actual two different scenarios I can think of. The third thing I want to talk about is something called the default tick method. We have seen this example of the set default while we are working in the first point here. Let me get back to Visual Studio Code. Let's assume I want to write a code that counts how many frequencies of letters pass in a sentence. In other words to say, let's say I have this sentence. Now what I want to do, I want to write a simple code that counts how many times each letter has been occurred in this sentence. For example, the T letter, the H letter, the I letter, etc. So the simplest way I can do, I'll show you here. I could use this function, let's say, letter frequency, which take, of course, a sentence. Let's create now a dictionary, empty dictionary. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to for a letter in this sentence. So here I'm going to create a variable. Let's call it the frequency. Actually, let me create this as a dictionary so it can be differentiated. So I'm going to a frequent dictionary, and then I'm going to use this powerful thing called set default. So this is the method that we used before. So in set default, we said, I want you to look for this letter if it exists. So if it is not, you just say it is 0. Remember? Now what happened, I will go to the dictionary again of that letter, and then I will just actual value that is returned up a +1 maybe. In any way, what I'm going to do, I will return dictionary. Now here, let me pass this sentence. Now if I want to run this line one more time, so the T occurred twice, H twice, I 4 times, etc. You get the point. So this is one way to solve the issue of counting using this set default that we discussed before. Now every time we access the dictionary, we need to check, of course, that it has a value already or not. When something like this needs to be done, every time an empty key is requested, we can use a different version now. That is the use of default dictionaries. So here I have to import from collections. Now default subclass will make sense in a while. So just let me do the following. Here once again, I'm going to create this frequent dictionary. However, this time, this dictionary will not be just an empty dictionary. So I will take an instance of this class, default dictionary class. Here it expects you to pass something called the default value. Let's instantiate of type integer. I will explain this in a while. And then I'm going to loop letters in the sentence that you sent to me. I will go to frequency dictionary of that particular letter. I will add 1. So let's return this dictionary anyway. And let's run this one more time. Watch the result very carefully. Of course, he's telling you that I am creating from the subclass default dictionary, taking the default of to be an integer. So it's the same exact result. Now, the only difference here is the mechanism how default dictionary work. In fact, he go directly to the dictionary and assuming this key exists. In the set default dictionary, we were checking. Here he is not. And here is the use of this argument. Whatever you set the default dictionary to be the value it would be. For example, if you pass a key to him, he will take the key and assume it exists. If it is not, he will just set a default integer, in this case 0. You could actually change this to be anything. Let's assume here with key, obviously it is not exist. Now what happened if I print one more time? Watch carefully what was the result return. It was 0. Why? Because the default was an integer. So there's tons of examples and practical examples you can use actually to benefit and utilize this powerful subclass. Another powerful subclass actually from this collections, I could also import something called counter. Let's assume here I just want to create a new function, but this time I will take it from collection of sentences, the frequency of them. So basically what happened, the counter of these sentences will be occurred. So we have this list of responses, containing certain of strings using list. Let's pass here this list to our function. So as expected, what happened is going to count frequency on instance, how many times happens. If I here just delete this function and I will talk directly now to counter itself, so I don't need the function in fact. exactly the same result I expected. But here what I'm going to show you, this is what I'm going to use number of these methods. I'll use this most common. It returns most common elements that occurred. Now you can see now the returning has changed from standard dictionary to a tuple. Will represent actually the key, the other will represent a value. I can add an argument. So the argument one here represented the most common frequent word occurred inside. If I put 2 here, of course, he's going to actually bring the others because some of them happens twice. Let me add one more value here. Chocolate happens to be twice. He should actually return for me the frequency of both. So he will not return those happens once. You can, of course, from here strip down to reach out to the first. So if you are creating an application of most common use words or something in the dictionary, this counter can be really handy. So that was all about dictionary. Next, we'll be discussing lists. I will see you then.